To show how we go from the current model to the new model, this chart explains what is involved. In the current model, the government pays salary plus tuition grants, and it also offers subsidies to students. In addition, schools charge fees to the students for the school services that they deliver. In the new model, we're going to be financing schools on a per student basis based on a number of credits of curriculum that they take at a particular school. That is what goes into the academic needs of the student, and we are also factoring a performance bonus to encourage quality and efficiency, and together that will give us our final payment. It is being proposed in our new model that the grant allocation to schools should enable the school to deliver the full 40 credit curriculum to students without the need for additional fees, or with at least minimum fees. If schools wish to have a non-standard curriculum, a curriculum beyond the standard curriculum, then they may choose to charge fees for those students. Under the new system, the money will follow the student. We show you this chart to show that the new system is quite in line with a proposal from the Belize Association of Principals of Secondary Schools that was developed in 2004. According to that proposal, BAPS asserted that public funds should be equitably distributed to schools in the form of equal per capita grants per student. The new formula that we are proposing will be per student based. Secondly, BAPS also proposed that the formula establish the total amount of administrative staff according to the size of the school. Third, that the total amount of teachers based on a desired pupil-teacher ratio of 25 students and the approved maximum teacher load. The formula that is proposed is a bit more complex than the one recommended by BAPS, but as part of the parameters we identified an average of 25 students per teacher as per the BAPS model, and average non-teaching costs. Adjustments according to the size are not considered in this new formula. In the BAPS proposal, they propose that our Ministry of Education covers 100% of teacher salaries. The new formula we're proposing will allow schools to cover 100% of teacher salaries. The BAPS proposal also proposes that there is full annual coverage of costs. The model we are proposing asserts new financial projections that cover 12 months of activities. The standard curriculum. The table below shows the standard curriculum proposed for each form that will be fully financed under the new proposal. It is important to note that this curriculum that is shown here is merely a brainstorm, is merely an example. It is not the curriculum that is going to be in schools eventually. That is something to be developed in collaboration with our schools. But this is just shown as an example, as a model of what might be possible. There is a core curriculum which is highlighted in green and the elective in white at the bottom, all totaling 40 credits. All students attending a given school would have to do the core, and then they can choose a number of electives to total 40 credits. Implementing the new model. How do we go from the current method of financing of tuition grants, salary grants, and fees to one that is per student per credit based and includes adjustments for students with special characteristics such as special academic need or socioeconomically disadvantaged, as well as includes adjustments to encourage performance, improvements in quality and efficiency? There are various possible scenarios for implementing this new model. Some general assumptions. First, for school services budget, the number of teachers is expected to grow at a rate of about 6%. Second, the annual budget growth was estimated at 6%. Third, tuition grants and salaries are expected to grow at 3%. Fourth, enrollment in secondary schools is expected to grow at an average rate of 4.6%. The average teacher salary is assumed to be pay scale 16, and teacher salaries are expected to grow at an annual rate of 2%. For the compensation component, the percentage of economically disadvantaged is estimated for each school based on a prevailing poverty rate for that district. The number of special needs children is estimated based on each high school's individual PSE scores intake, the percentage of new incoming students with a PSE less than 60. The component on performance has not yet been included in the estimations. This is something that we hope to add within the second year of implementation. Here we have an example of two schools, one which is above average in funding and the other which is below average in funding. At the very top we have the general characteristics of the schools and the current total grants that each school receives from the government in the form of tuition and salary grants. You note that each school has an enrollment of 771. One school has 56 teachers, the other one has 54. But you will note that in the first school, they're getting a total grant from the government of over $2 million, while the other school is getting a grant of just over $1.6 million. If we apply the new formula, we can calculate the school services grant based on the cost per student per credit. Here in this example, it is set at 93 cents, times the number of students, times the number of credits, times, in this case, the number of credits over the whole year, which would give us a total school services grant of just over $1 million. This would apply to both schools since they have the same number of students. However, as we already noted before, the per student model that we're following includes adjustments for the characteristics of the student intake of the schools. At the moment, those characteristics are their socioeconomic status as well as their special academic needs. In the first school, we ascertain that based on the district that the school is located, there is a 39% poverty rate prevailing in that district. We will therefore assume that 39% of the students in that school, or 301 of the students, are socioeconomically disadvantaged. In the other school, where the poverty rate in that district is higher, we will assume the poverty rate of the district to be applied to that school, in which case we're saying 48% of their students, or 370, are socioeconomically disadvantaged. In terms of special academic needs, the first school has 23% of its population below 60% on PSE, and the second school has 25% of its population below 60 on the PSE. This translates into 180 and 190 students respectively. We note from the formula that to calculate the compensation-based grant, we need to multiply the costs per student per credit times 1.1 times the number of students times the number of credits. Here we have already done the costs per student per credit. We have factored in that 1.1 in the number of extra credits per week, and that turns out to be 1,584. When we do the math and we multiply the number of students times the coefficient of need times the cost per student per credit, in the first case we get 706,936. In the second case we get 822,493. When we add then the school services grant and the total compensation based grant for the above average school, we see that they should be getting a grant of just over $1.7 million, and the below average school should be getting a grant of just over $1.8 million. You will note that this represents a difference from the funding that they are currently getting. In the above average school, it represents $300,000 less than they are currently getting. In the below average school, it would represent just over $200,000 more than they're currently getting. So how do we make the transition? How do we ensure that we can afford to give the below average school the additional $200,000, and how do we ensure that the above average school receives a fair share of public funding? Well, there are several scenarios that are proposed for achieving that objective. In scenario 1A, what we can do is to take the above average allocation and to reduce it stepwise over a period of 5 years, so that each year there would be a 20% decrease in funding to that school. And for the below average, we can increase stepwise as well, so that each year there would be a 20% increase for that school until they both achieve equilibrium at the average. That's scenario 1A. In scenario 1B, the same applies for the above average schools, stepwise reduction in its allocation over a 5-year period. So if you imagine the $300,000, dividing that by 5, that would mean each year that school would be getting $60,000 less than it did the year before. But in scenario 1B, for the below average school, we would increase the allocation immediately to the full amount for the below average school. So they would get that $200,000 in one fell swoop in the first year. The second set of scenarios provide a different avenue to achieve the objective. In scenario 2A, you note that for the above average school, their current allocation would be frozen at the current per student rate that they're getting, while the below average school would be given an immediate boost of its current allocation to the new allocation. You may ask, how will this achieve equilibrium over time if the above average school is simply frozen? Well, because the above average school, although frozen, the value of the grant would decrease with time because of inflation. Whereas in the below average school, the grant would be adjusted for inflation, and so eventually they would achieve equilibrium. In scenario 2B, we have a similar situation where the above average school is frozen at current per student rates, and then we have a stepwise increase in the below average school until equilibrium is reached, which would be achieved not only in a stepwise increase but also with adjustments for inflation. Finally, there is a third scenario which might otherwise be described as shock therapy. Those with above average allocation are brought down immediately, and those with below average allocation are brought up immediately to the new equilibrium value. That would be equivalent to the school with $300,000 above the average being given $300,000 less immediately, and the school that was $200,000 below the average being given $200,000 more immediately. This obviously has implications for the school that is losing in its capacity to cope with such a change immediately, but it also has implications for the school that is gaining in terms of coping with the additional funds that it is gaining immediately, to ensure that it can effectively use and efficiently use those additional funds to benefit its students. That summarizes the different scenarios for achieving the transition between the current method of the financing of secondary schools and the proposed per student per credit method, which includes adjustments for the characteristics of students as well as an adjustment to encourage performance, improvements in quality and efficiency. That then summarizes the proposed implementation of the new financing method.